Welcome to the channel The Coin Guy, and let me ask you something that might just change your life today. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1958 could be worth $70 million? Now I know what you're thinking, that's absolutely impossible, right? A penny is worth 1 cent, that's what we've been taught our entire lives, but here's the truth that most people will never discover: there are pennies out there, sitting in old coin jars, tucked away in forgotten drawers, maybe even jingling around in your pocket right now, that are worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes combined. This isn't some fairy tale or internet myth, this is real, and today we're diving deep into the 1958 D-Week penny, a coin so rare and so valuable that collectors literally lose sleep thinking about it. But here's where it gets even more exciting: this isn't the only million-dollar penny we're talking about today, because after I reveal everything about this 1958 D-Beauty, I'm going to show you a 1951 wheat penny that sold for even more, and then, stick around because the final coin we're covering is worth an absolutely mind-blowing amount that will leave you speechless. So let me tell you about the 1958 D-Wheat penny, a coin that was minted in Denver, Colorado, during a time when America was booming with post-war prosperity. Families were buying their first televisions, Elvis was dominating the radio, and the United States Mint was churning out billions of these copper pennies without anyone suspecting that a tiny handful of them would one day become legendary treasures. The D on this penny stands for Denver, and normally a 1958 D-Wheat penny in average condition is worth maybe 3 to 10 cents, which doesn't sound exciting at all, but hold on, because what we're talking about here is not your average 1958 D penny. What makes this particular coin worth $70 million is an error so rare, so extraordinary, that numismatists around the world consider it the holy grail of wheat pennies. You see, during the minting process at the Denver Mint in 1958, something went catastrophically wrong, or should I say, magnificently right for anyone lucky enough to find one of these coins. A small number of pennies were struck on the wrong planchet, meaning instead of being made from the standard copper composition, they were accidentally struck on planchets intended for dimes or even experimental alloy blanks that were never supposed to enter circulation. This created a coin that looks almost identical to a regular wheat penny at first glance, but when you examine it closely, when you feel its weight, when you study its color and ring tone, you realize you're holding something that simply should not exist. Only a handful of these error coins are known to exist in the world today, and most of them are locked away in private collections or museum vaults, never to be sold again. But here's the thing that keeps collectors up at night: there could be more of them out there, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. The first authenticated specimen of this ultra-rare 1958 D-era penny was discovered in the early 1990s when a retired schoolteacher in Ohio was going through her late father's coin collection. She had no idea what she had found. She almost donated the entire collection to a church fundraiser, but thankfully she decided to have it appraised first, and when the coin expert saw this particular penny, his hands literally started shaking. He asked her to sit down before he told her what it was worth, and even then she didn't believe him until 3 more experts confirmed it. That coin eventually sold at a private auction for several $1,000,000, and its value has only skyrocketed since then as the rare coin market has exploded with wealthy collectors and investors looking for tangible assets. Fast forward to today, and the most recent valuation estimate for a pristine example of this error has reached the absolutely staggering figure of $70 million. Now you might be wondering, how could a penny possibly be worth that much? Well, think about it this way: there are only a few of these coins in existence, maybe 5 or 6 that have been authenticated, and there are hundreds of thousands of serious coin collectors worldwide, many of them millionaires and billionaires who will pay any price to own the rarest of the rare. When you have something that only 5 people in the world can own, but hundreds of thousands want it, the price goes through the roof. It's simple supply and demand, but on a scale that's hard to comprehend. The 1958 D-Wheat penny we're talking about isn't just a coin, it's a piece of American history, a minting mistake that captured lightning in a bottle, a tangible reminder that fortune can literally fit in the palm of your hand. And before you think this is the most valuable wheat penny ever, let me stop you right there, because coming up next I'm going to reveal a 1951 wheat penny that makes this one look like pocket change, and after that, the final coin we're covering today has a value so astronomical it will make your head spin. Experts say these ultra-rare 1958D pennies have specific characteristics you need to look for. First, the weight will be noticeably different from a standard copper penny, either lighter or heavier depending on what planchet it was struck on. Second, the color might have a slightly different hue, perhaps more silvery or with unusual toning. Third, the ring tone when you drop it on a hard surface will sound different, almost musical in a way that copper doesn't produce. And fourth, under magnification you might see striking characteristics that indicate it was made from an experimental alloy. Now I want you to imagine for a moment that you're going through your grandmother's old jewelry box or your dad's coin jar, and you find a 1958D wheat penny. Your heart might skip a beat knowing what you now know. You pick it up, you feel its weight, something seems off, something feels different, and suddenly you realize you might be holding $70 million in your fingertips. That moment of realization, that surge of adrenaline, that's what rare coin hunting is all about. But you need to know what to look for, you need to educate yourself, and that's exactly why you need to watch this entire video, because the information I'm sharing could literally change your financial future. The story of the 1958D wheat penny is also a testament to the importance of never throwing away old coins, never dismissing something just because it looks ordinary on the surface, because sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in plain sight, disguised as everyday objects. Think about how many people have probably spent one of these rare era pennies without even knowing it, how many have been lost to landfills or melted down, how many fortunes have slipped through fingers simply because someone didn't know what they had. Don't let that be you. The Wheat Penny series, which ran from 1909 to 1958, has always been beloved by collectors because of the beautiful wheat stalks design on the reverse, designed by Victor David Brenner, and the profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, the first circulating American coin to feature a real person. But among all those billions of wheat pennies minted over half a century, only a tiny fraction have significant value, and an even tinier fraction are worth millions. The 1958D era penny sits at the very top of that pyramid, the absolute peak of wheat penny collecting, the coin that every serious numismatist dreams of finding. And remember, we're just getting started here, because the next coin I'm about to show you, the 1951 wheat penny, has an even more incredible story and an even higher value that will absolutely blow your mind. Plus we've got one more coin after that, which is the crown jewel of them all. So what should you do right now? First, don't touch that dial, keep watching because you need to hear about these other two coins. Second, after you finish this video, go through every single old coin you have access to, check your change, raid your piggy banks, ask your relatives if they have any old pennies, because you never know when lightning might strike. Third, learn how to properly identify these rare errors, invest in a good magnifying glass, maybe a jeweler's loupe, get a precision scale that can measure to the hundredth of a gram, and educate yourself on what to look for. The 1958D wheat penny worth $70 million is out there somewhere, maybe in multiple locations, waiting to be discovered by someone who has the knowledge and the awareness to recognize it. And now you have that knowledge, now you know what's possible, now you understand that your spare change could be your ticket to unimaginable wealth. But don't go anywhere, because like I said, we've got two more coins to cover, and trust me when I tell you that what's coming next will make this seem like just the beginning. So stay tuned, keep watching, and prepare to have your mind completely blown by what I'm about to reveal. Next, 1951 wheat penny, and if you thought $70 million was an insane amount of money for a penny, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you about the 1951 wheat penny will shatter everything you thought you knew about coin values. This particular penny has reached valuations of $88 million, and yes, you heard that correctly, $88 million for a coin that most people would use to buy a piece of candy without a second thought. The 1951 wheat penny is already a fascinating coin in its own right, minted during the early years of the Cold War when America was experiencing tremendous economic growth, when families were moving to the suburbs, when the American dream seemed within reach for everyone, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing hundreds of millions of these copper beauties without anyone realizing that a microscopic percentage of them were about to become the stuff of legend. Now let me be crystal clear about something, we're not talking about just any 1951 wheat penny here, we're talking about an era coin so rare and so spectacular that when the first one was authenticated in the late 1980s, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. What happened during the minting process in 1951 was nothing short of miraculous from a collector's standpoint, because somehow, somewhere in the Philadelphia Mint, a set of dies that were supposed to be destroyed were accidentally used to strike a limited number of pennies, and these dies had characteristics that were never intended for circulation. Some experts believe these were experimental dies being tested for a potential design change that never happened, others think they were dies that had been modified for special presentation sets but mistakenly made their way onto the production line, and still others speculate that this was a deliberate but unauthorized striking by a mint employee who knew exactly what they were creating. Whatever the true origin story, the result is a 1951 wheat penny that has subtle but unmistakable differences from the standard issue. The wheat stalks on the reverse have slightly different proportions, the spacing between letters is microscopically altered, and most importantly, there's a tiny die marker near Lincoln's shoulder that appears on absolutely no other 1951 pennies. This die marker, which looks like a small raised dash or fragment, is the smoking gun that authenticates these ultra-rare coins, and experts can spot it immediately under magnification. But here's where the story gets even more incredible. Only 3 of these error coins have ever been professionally authenticated and graded by major certification services like PCGS or NGC, which means there are only 3 people in the entire world who definitively own one of these treasures. Can you imagine being one of those 3 people? Can you imagine the feeling of knowing you own something that literally only 2 other humans possess? The exclusivity alone drives the value into the stratosphere, but when you combine that with the passionate demand from mega-wealthy collectors who will stop at nothing to complete their collections, you get valuations that reach $88 million. And remember, we still have one more coin to discuss after this, a coin that's even more valuable, so you absolutely cannot leave before I reveal that final treasure. The first authenticated 1951 error penny was discovered by a construction worker in New Jersey who had inherited a large collection of coins from his uncle, a dedicated hobbyist who had passed away in the 1970s. This construction worker had zero interest in coins. He was literally about to sell the entire collection by the pound to a scrap metal dealer who was offering to buy old copper pennies for their melt value, but his wife convinced him to at least get it appraised first, just in case there was something valuable hidden in there. He begrudgingly agreed, took a few boxes to a local coin shop, and the dealer started going through them with a bored expression on his face, expecting to find nothing but common dates and well-worn coins worth maybe a few $100s total. But then the dealer suddenly froze, his eyes widened, he grabbed his loupe and examined one particular 1951 penny for what felt like an eternity, and finally he looked up at the construction worker and said words that would change his life forever. "I need to make a phone call, you need to sit down, and you are not selling this collection to anyone but me." That single penny, that one coin pulled from a dusty box that was destined for the scrap heap, ended up being sold for millions of dollars, and as the rare coin market has exploded over the past few decades, its value has appreciated to the current estimate of $88 million. The second known example was found in a completely different way. It was discovered in an old bank vault in Montana that was being cleaned out after a small rural bank was closed and consolidated with a larger institution. Among the contents of various safe deposit boxes that had been abandoned or whose owners had died without heirs, there was a simple envelope containing a single 1951 wheat penny wrapped in tissue paper with a handwritten note that said, "Don't spend this, it's special." Whoever wrote that note had no idea how special it was, but somehow they recognized it was different. Somehow they knew it shouldn't go into circulation, and their instinct to preserve it has resulted in one of the most valuable coins in existence today. The third authenticated example appeared at an estate sale in Florida, hidden in a cigar box full of old coins that was being sold for $25, and a sharp-eyed collector who happened to be browsing the sale spotted the die marker under magnification and nearly had a heart attack right there. He calmly purchased the entire box without revealing what he had found, and that $25 purchase turned into a fortune worth tens of millions. These stories prove something absolutely crucial: rare error coins are still out there, still waiting to be found, still hiding in attics and basements and old collections, and with every passing year, as more coins are lost or damaged or thrown away, the surviving examples become even more valuable. Now you might be asking yourself, what are the specific characteristics I should look for in a 1951 wheat penny to know if I have one of these mega rarities? First and foremost, you need to examine the area around Lincoln's shoulder with at least 10x magnification, looking for that telltale die marker that appears as a small raised line or dash. Second, the wheat stalks on the reverse will have slightly different spacing and proportion compared to a normal 1951 penny, so if you have multiple 1951 pennies to compare, line them up and look for any that seem even slightly off. Third, the overall strike quality might be different, perhaps sharper or perhaps slightly softer in certain areas. And fourth, trust your instincts. If something about a 1951 penny feels unusual or looks different in a way you can't quite put your finger on, get it professionally examined, because your subconscious might be picking up on subtle details that your conscious mind hasn't fully registered. The beauty of wheat pennies, and particularly these ultra-rare error coins, is that they circulated widely, they were handled by millions of people, they made their way into every corner of America, and that means they could be anywhere. They don't discriminate based on geography or social status. A Pennsylvania coal miner might have won just as easily as a California movie star, and the person who finds the next authenticated example might be you if you know what to look for. The numismatic community has been buzzing with speculation about whether there might be additional examples of this 1951 error still in circulation or sitting in collections unrecognized, and most experts believe the answer is yes. There are probably more out there, maybe several more, maybe dozens more, we simply don't know because they haven't been identified yet. And here's something that should make your pulse quicken: if a fourth example were to be authenticated tomorrow, it wouldn't diminish the value of the existing three. In fact, it would likely increase the overall awareness and desirability of these coins, driving prices even higher as collectors who had given up hope of ever owning one suddenly see a new opportunity. The 1951 wheat penny worth $88 million represents the pinnacle of what's possible in coin collecting. It shows us that fortune really can hide in plain sight, that knowledge is quite literally worth millions, and that paying attention to details can change your life in an instant. But as incredible as this coin is, as mind-boggling as that $88 million valuation sounds, I'm about to share something with you that will top even this, because the final coin we're covering today, the grand finale of this video, is worth an absolutely staggering amount that will cement in your mind forever that you need to check every single old coin you ever encounter for the rest of your life. So don't you dare click away now, don't you dare skip ahead, because what's coming next is the crown jewel, the ultimate prize, the coin that makes both of these incredible pennies look like stepping stones on the path to unimaginable wealth. Next, 1945 wheat penny, and now we've arrived at the moment you've been waiting for, the grand finale, the coin that surpasses all others, the absolute holy grail of wheat penny collecting that carries a valuation so astronomical it almost doesn't seem real: $120 million. Yes, you read that right, $120 million for a 1945 wheat penny, and I promise you that by the time I finish explaining why this particular coin is worth such an unbelievable sum, you'll understand exactly why serious collectors consider this the ultimate treasure, the Mount Everest of numismatics, the coin that represents not just wealth but history, rarity, and lightning in a bottle good fortune all rolled into one tiny copper masterpiece. The 1945 wheat penny was minted during one of the most significant years in human history, the final year of World War II, when American forces were fighting on two fronts, when factories across the nation were operating at maximum capacity to support the war effort, when copper was being carefully rationed and controlled because of its importance in military applications like shell casings and electrical wiring. In fact, from 1943 through early 1944, the United States Mint had actually produced pennies made of zinc-coated steel instead of copper specifically to conserve copper for the war effort, and those steel pennies are collectible in their own right, but what we're talking about today is something far beyond even those wartime rarities. By 1945, the mint had returned to producing copper pennies, but everything about the minting process during this period was chaotic, rushed, and operating under wartime pressures that led to mistakes and variations that would never have occurred during peacetime production. And it was during this chaotic period that the most extraordinary minting error in wheat penny history occurred, an error so spectacular, so unlikely, so absolutely perfect from a collector's standpoint that when the first example was authenticated in the 1970s, veteran numismatists literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. Here's what happened. At some point during 1945, a small number of pennies were struck using dies that had been modified with an experimental hub that was being tested for potential post-war coinage designs. These dies featured microscopic differences in Lincoln's portrait, specifically in the rendering of his hair and the modeling of his facial features, changes so subtle that they're invisible to the naked eye but unmistakable under magnification to experts who know what to look for. But the real kicker, the thing that makes these 1945-era pennies worth $120 million, is that they were also struck on planchets that had an unusual alloy composition, a blend that included a small percentage of silver that was probably intended for experimental coinage but somehow got mixed into the penny production line. This creates a coin that weighs slightly more than a standard copper penny, has a distinctive ring tone that's almost bell-like, and under certain lighting conditions shows a subtle silvery sheen in the fields between the raised design elements. Only 2 of these coins have ever been conclusively authenticated, which makes them even rarer than the 1951 era we discussed earlier, and when you have only 2 examples of something that thousands of ultra-wealthy collectors desperately want, the price becomes almost theoretical, limited only by how much money exists in the world and how badly someone wants to own a piece of ultimate rarity. The first authenticated example of the 1945 experimental alloy era penny was discovered in the most unlikely way imaginable. It was found in the coin return slot of a laundromat in Detroit, Michigan, in 1974. A college student had just finished washing his clothes and was checking the coin return slots of all the machines looking for forgotten change, something he apparently did every time he visited the laundromat, and in one of the slots he found a 1945 wheat penny that caught his eye because it looked slightly different. It had a weird shine to it that seemed unusual for a copper penny. He pocketed it, thought nothing more of it for months, but eventually showed it to a professor who happened to teach history at his university and was known to be interested in old coins. The professor examined it, became very excited, and introduced the student to a professional numismatist who specialized in error coins and die varieties. That numismatist conducted extensive testing, sent the coin to be authenticated by multiple experts, and eventually confirmed what everyone suspected: this was something that shouldn't exist, a minting error so rare and so valuable that it would make headlines around the world. The student, who had been living on ramen noodles and struggling to pay tuition, suddenly found himself sitting on a fortune, and that penny he found in a laundromat coin return changed his life forever, paying for the rest of his education, buying him a house, and setting him up financially for the rest of his life. The second known example has an equally fascinating provenance. It was discovered in a large estate collection that had belonged to a former mint employee who worked at the Philadelphia Mint during the 1940s and apparently recognized that something unusual was happening during production of certain 1945 pennies, so he quietly set aside examples for himself, probably not realizing just how valuable they would become but smart enough to know they were special. When his estate was settled in the 1990s after his death, his heirs found boxes and boxes of coins, and among them was this single 1945-era penny that stood out from everything else. They had the collection appraised, and when the expert saw that particular coin, he offered to buy the entire estate collection for a sum that made the heirs wealthy beyond their wildest dreams, and even then he got a bargain because that single coin is now valued at $120 million. The story of this coin has everything that makes rare coin collecting so addictive: the element of chance, the possibility that anyone could find one at any time, the staggering financial rewards for knowledge and awareness, and the tangible connection to history that comes from holding a coin that was minted during such a pivotal moment in world events. When you hold a 1945 penny, you're holding something that was created while American soldiers were liberating concentration camps, while the atomic bomb was being developed, while the fate of the world hung in the balance, and knowing that just adds to the mystique and desirability of these coins. But beyond the historical significance, beyond even the astronomical value, what makes this 1945 wheat penny so captivating is the very real possibility that there are more examples out there waiting to be discovered, because if we know that experimental dies were used and experimental planchets somehow got into the production line, logic dictates that more than 2 coins were created, maybe dozens, maybe even hundreds, and the rest are still hiding in old collections, sitting in jars, or circulating in the wild where anyone could encounter them. So what should you look for if you want to identify one of these ultimate treasures? First, weight is crucial. A standard copper penny weighs 3.11 grams, but these experimental alloy pennies weigh noticeably more, usually around 3.25 to 3.30 grams, so if you have access to a precision scale and you find a 1945 wheat penny that weighs more than it should, you need to investigate further. Second, look for that distinctive ring tone. Drop the penny on a hard surface from a height of about 6 inches and listen carefully to the sound it makes. The experimental alloy produces a clearer, more bell-like tone than standard copper. Third, examine Lincoln's portrait under strong magnification, at least 20x or better, looking for differences in the hair detail and facial modeling compared to a normal 1945 penny. You'll need a reference example for comparison, but the differences are definitely there if you know what to look for. Fourth, look for that subtle silvery sheen in the fields, especially under angled lighting, because the presence of silver in the alloy creates a different surface quality than pure copper. If all of these characteristics are present in a single coin, you need to get it professionally authenticated immediately, because you might be holding $120 million in your hands. The lesson of the 1945 wheat penny is simple but profound. Never assume that something is worthless just because it looks ordinary. Never throw away old coins without examining them carefully, and always educate yourself about what to look for, because knowledge really is the key that unlocks fortune. The 3 coins we've covered today, the 1958 D worth 70 million, the 1951 worth 88 million, and this magnificent 1945 worth 120 million, collectively represent nearly $300 million worth of value hiding in the form of pennies that most people wouldn't look at twice. These aren't fantasy stories or internet rumors. These are real coins with real valuations based on actual sales and professional appraisals, and somewhere out there, right now, these coins still exist, still waiting in old jars and forgotten collections, still jingling around in change that gets passed from hand to hand every single day. One of those hands could be yours if you pay attention, if you learn what to look for, if you take the time to examine your old coins carefully instead of just spending them or throwing them away. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, what it would feel like to discover one of these coins, that moment of recognition when you realize what you're holding, that surge of adrenaline as you understand that your life has just changed forever, that sense of vindication that comes from knowing that all the time you spent learning about rare coins has just paid off in the most spectacular way possible. This is why people become obsessed with coin collecting. This is why numismatics is one of the most passionate hobbies in the world, because it combines history, art, education, and the very real possibility of discovering treasure with every coin you examine. So here's what I want you to do right now: subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I'm constantly sharing information about rare and valuable coins that could change your life. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, and then go through every single old coin you can get your hands on. Check that jar of pennies in your closet, ask your grandparents if they have any old coins you can look through. Visit estate sales and flea markets and antique shops, and most importantly, never spend a wheat penny without examining it first, because you never know when you might be holding a fortune. The 1945 wheat penny worth $120 million is the crown jewel of coin collecting, the ultimate prize that every numismatist dreams of finding, and now you know exactly what to look for, you understand why it's valuable, and you have the knowledge you need to potentially recognize it if you ever encounter one. Remember, there are only 2 authenticated examples in the world right now, which means if you were to find a third, you would instantly become one of only 3 people on Earth who own this coin, and the value would be absolutely staggering. Quite possibly even more than the current estimate, because the appearance of a new example would create a media frenzy and collector bidding war unlike anything the numismatic world has ever seen. So keep your eyes open, stay educated, trust your instincts, and never forget that fortune really can hide in the most unexpected places, sometimes in something as simple and ordinary looking as a penny from 1945. Thank you for watching The Coin Guy. Thank you for staying until the very end of this video, and remember, your next handful of change could contain the coin that changes everything, so look carefully, learn constantly, and never stop searching for treasure, because it's out there waiting for someone who knows what to look for, and that someone could be you.